All right, so before we do the simul, let's take a look at game one of the World Chess Championship match between Nepo and Ding. Okay, so all right, so based on what Ding said, he wasn't sure about what to play before the game. That's definitely not the World Chess Championship match preparation level, because the strategy is being formulated months in advance of the match, not the night before. Yeah. I mean, maybe he had some choices, but ideally, this decision should have been done like a long time ago. Anyway, so they play Spanish. Bishop e7 is probably going to be Marshall, so that's why Nepo takes. And now he introduces rook e1, relatively obscure move. Basically, he wants to play this game as the exchange Raul Lopez, with the inclusion of castling and knight f6, bishop e7. Yeah, so according to Twitter by Gustafsson, responding to Magnus about this variation, Gustafsson claimed that there is bishop g4, h3, bishop h5 line, which he mentioned in his course. I don't know this line at all. I mean, I don't remember knight d7 was a pretty common move here. So this was played. And now we reached the Raul Lopez exchange variation. Hello, Mr. Falcon. How are you? Doing quick recap of the game one. That was yesterday. They have 14 games. Tomorrow they play game number 2, but okay. Nepo missed some of his chances, right? All right, so queen d4, castles, pretty normal. You got a castle. Now the question, bishop f4, knight c3. I think bishop f4 is probably the most challenging, because of knight c5 you have to decide where to put your queen. So the only question is, if you take this queen, then he takes to the bishop and protects this pawn. Knight also goes to e6, and the bishop goes to g4. If white trades the queens, there is absolutely nothing for white here in this endgame, in the classical chess format. So the question is, where should the queen go? Maybe you should play queen c3 or queen e3. And if you play queen c3, then you develop the knight to d2. Also makes sense. Then knight goes to c4. But Nepo plays queen e3. Pretty sure he analyzed this whole thing. So let's see what happened. Bishop g4. Ding wants to move this bishop out, so he has full connection between the rooks, piece harmony, etc., etc. Knight e6 looks more in line with the structure now, because if you play knight e6, and then you can possibly play b6, bishop b7, c5, and again, it's sort of like an exchange variation, except you have the queens on board. Ideally, also black wants to play something like f5, so you open the position for the bishop pair. But again, not so simple. So knight e6 probably analyzed by Nepo. So let's take a look. Threat is bishop c5. You cannot give this bishop, so this bishop goes. And the question is, why black cannot play bishop c5 now? And the question is where this queen is going. Pretty serious question. Again, depends how white wants to develop. If he plays queen e2, there is pretty good chance black can just play knight d4 at some point. But queen e2 is unfortunate choice, because knight can go to f4, hit the queen, so probably queen will go to c3. And then you try to use this bishop, kind of awkward location, because on this diagonal doesn't do much. You need this bishop sort of on this diagonal, or this diagonal actually. All right, so in the game he played bishop g4 because he was not familiar with this line. There are nuances. He plays knight d4, and the idea is if you play knight c3 now, you definitely fall for knight e6 and bishop c5, yeah, and black is just better. So yeah, what are you gonna do? I mean, if you play h3 or knight e5, bishop just moves. It goes to g6, and you need to finish the development. Right, so that's why knight d4 was born. You prevent knight e6, and you prepare the standard f3 knight c3 exchange variation structure, right? You have 4 versus 3 on the king side. So white really wants to trade a lot of stuff. Ideally, you want to trade the bishops and the knights and queens and rooks, and you leave yourself with king and knight versus king and bishop. And with these pawns, it's probably winning endgame. Also, even if you have just rooks on board and you have this endgame, it's extremely unpleasant. So any endgame will be extremely unpleasant for black. So black has to find a way to, survive this structure, open the position, do some favorable trades, and hope for a draw. As we can see, the valuation the engine gives is better for white at depth, actually 42 with the neural network stockfish. So that means white's advantage are actually pretty serious. All right, queen d7. Natural, right? Connect the rooks. Either this rook goes to d8 or either it goes to e8. And the question is, does black want to play f5? I remember I played against computers something like this position was black, like about 10 years ago. The computer just crushed me with white. Absolutely, I had no chance. All right, so h3 first, or knight c3, and yeah, and there was some mention of this h3 move. The idea is that if you take the knight, this very nice shot of knight d5, you attack the queen, you attack the bishop. If you take with the rook, you just take the rook, and again, both bishops are hanging, and white captures one of the minor pieces and has extra change in the end. And if black takes here, you grab, and you grab with the bishop, again, hitting the knight and the bishop, and you win the game. So h3 was very nice, because if black moves the bishop, then knight goes to f5 with a humongous effect, yeah, because you hit everything. Bishop cannot no longer take this knight. And the computer plays incredibly cool rook f e8 move. And even then, apparently after queen g3 is not so simple. I'm just wondering why I cannot take this. So if you play knight d5 now, he just takes and then takes the pawn. So you gotta take. And the question is why you cannot take this pawn now, yeah? Gives you a pawn, but this pawn is doubled, so it's not quite as effective. Plus black gets some counterplay along the d file. So very good chance for black to draw this game, because for white it is almost impossible to create a passed pawn here, protected passed pawn, when you push 4 versus 3 here. So a lot of endgame should be okay. Hi Vina, what's up? All right, but still an extra pawn, yeah, some advantage. All right, so in the game, Nepo played. What did he play? He played knight. He played knight f5 here, and this allows for black to take this knight and just protect the bishop and double pawns for white. Maybe some symbolic advantage for white, but seems to be pretty okay, because this pawn is hanging. You gotta play g4, and black can just play bishop d6 and trade absolutely everything, and black's fine, yeah, because there is no attack. This knight is as good as this one. It's a pretty equal game. So I'm very surprised Dink actually played this move. He didn't take on f5. He played this and allowed white to take the bishop and play bishop g3, because now white's advantage is obvious and undisputable. Superior pawn structure, superior bishop hitting the weakness. The only thing black has as compensation is a superior knight, which can go to d4 mostly. and the opposite color bishops, which gives him good chance for a draw in any endgame. But compared to the line with bishop f5, black is just worse anyway. So let's see what happens. Bishop h5, f3. Make sure you get the square for your rook. Now the bishop, disconnect the bishop. f6, standard defensive move. Bishop goes to f7. This move is to prevent white playing f4, e5. Very defensive move. h3 to make sure you get the king going here. You want to kind of leave the knight on c3 for now, because if you play knight e2, there is some kind of f5 possible. So both sides are like, making fortifications. Bishop f7, rook d1. Finally, white goes for the trade, but with each trade, the chances for draw increase for black because of the opposite color bishops. Except that is not so simple. Yeah, b6 is a little bit weird because you put another pawn on the dark square, which means this bishop can potentially target this pawn. So ideally, you don't really want to play b6, but I think he was a little bit worried about a3 and queen a7. First you play a3 to make sure black doesn't have queen b4. Then you play queen a7, and suddenly it's not so easy to defend these pawns. Yeah. Again, look at this bishop, very, very strong. So he plays b6, he prevents queen a7. But now these pawns are getting very vulnerable. Yeah, and the computer plays f4, f5 with the idea of e5, because if you have opposite color bishops, you just sort of blow open the center, and this f pawn can potentially ram black's king sides. Thank you for subscribing, Mr. Checkmates. All right, so f4 makes a lot of sense. Again, f5, e5, open the position. With the opposite color bishops, the attack is extremely unpleasant because your opponent doesn't have the bishop to counter yours. He plays a3 and black plays a5. And knight e2 is played. Yeah. So again, probably f4, f5 was the best idea. Knight e2 is kind of very strange. I suppose he wanted to play c3 to put the knight on d4 with the idea of capturing with the pawn. But it looks kind of weird. Take, and now black continues the trades. I think c5 was fine, leaving this rook alive, because you need to protect this pawn, probably with the rook. And then the bishop can go to e6 and cover this entry square. Yeah. Okay, rook d8 is reasonable. Rook d3. So, and now we arrive at this. This was a little bit weird, but okay. c5, traditional idea. Knight goes to d4. Yeah, and we have this critical position. Yes, a lot of commentators commented on this being a bad move, and I agree, right? I mean, bringing the king to here, or even bishop to c6 makes a lot of sense, but bringing the king here makes a lot of sense because your king can run to c8 and personally protect this pawn, which should make it very, very close to a defense draw. But after c6, the square is being very vulnerable now. So naturally, white wants to get with the knight, with the bishop. So he actually takes, because you cannot recapture with the queen now. You got to capture with the knight, which means white has a temporary control of the d file. In fact, queen now can enter b8, which he does. And black is in a big trouble. So you see, he had to play, black played b6, b5, c5, c6, and he made all his pawns advanced and vulnerable. All right, queen b8, king h7. Yes, and that was a very surprising moment. I don't understand. I don't understand why he wouldn't just grab this pawn for free, right? Potentially, you have now a chance to create pass pawn. You also leave black with the double pawns that are also weak, but you just grab an extra pawn. I don't understand why he wouldn't grab this pawn. It's just an extra pawn, man. It's a very surprising decision. He played bishop d6, and according to the computer, we had to play queen c7 and trade the queens, but that forces the knight to b7, which is terrible square. And but it's +1, yeah. So there is a huge difference between evaluation mark, but also the huge difference if you play bishop d6, queen c7, allow black to protect this pawn, and you just take this pawn. Yeah. So after bishop d6, it looks like a draw. Knight g3, no threat. Oh yeah, the reason he didn't take on here, and that's also very interesting, is because of queen d2, knight e6, and black managed to trade the knights successfully, and now it's queen and bishop versus queen and bishop, and it's very likely a draw. Okay, because again, trading knights was key. So Nepo wants to keep the knights, he doesn't take the pawn, but okay, now he wants to play f5, e5 maybe. I don't know what he wants to do. They're running probably in time trouble here or something. c3, c4, h4, and queen d8. And black forces the trade, and you had to take the queen now. Yeah, you had to take the queen, play f5, bishop e7, knight e2, and try to win this endgame. Probably not, but it's better than this one because black got a much better version. Just plays queen d7, and the bishop is already on d7 for black, so it's just pretty equal. Yeah, it's important that you don't take on e5, okay? Keep the pawn here. So the king is coming to f7, and you cannot play e6 because this bishop is hanging. And black just sacrifices his pawn because you don't need this pawn, because you cannot create pass pawn anyway, and the knight gets active, and it's just now a dead draw. Yeah, make sure you don't blunder the piece, and it's just dead draw. All right, so that was the game for the game one. Let's do the simul. Hey, Roya. All right, guys, let's start the simul. I was doing quick recap of the first game. Just wanted to share some things that I noticed about this game. I didn't want to go the detailed analysis. It's just the basic things, okay?